Why, hello there, barbarians of the mountains and forests alike. Shams Nelson here from Pen and Blade, and in this new style of video, I'm going to be doing some kind of impromptu world building based on a prompt. And as you probably saw from the description and stuff, or the name of the video, I'm going to be looking at the barbarian cross-classed between all the different other classes, and kind of just playing around with that idea and see what we can come up with. And this is a new type of content because you may have heard, I'm going to make a proper announcement video soon, but all the drawing stuff, the drawing tutorials and everything except for maybe Draw D&D probably is going over to Pencil Power, which is my new channel. And I'll put a link in the description or somewhere in these cards or whatever. But if you're into the drawing stuff on this channel, definitely go and subscribe there because that's its new home. That's where it shall dwell. And so that kind of is opening things up. So I did that so that, you know, now I can kind of have more just pure D&D or actually just fantasy world building in general. I like to use D&D as the big prompt because, you know, it's very well established. But just kind of fantasy world building in general. And so let me know if you like videos like this where I'm just kind of chatting about, you know, ideas and kind of coming up with new concepts and things you can use for your characters or for your world, whether you're a DM or a player. And also let me know what your ideas are related to this prompt too, because I really love the collaboration of world building. So we can do that in the comments. All right, let's get started. So barbarians and barbarians, you know, if you cross-class a barbarian with a barbarian, they just become extra barbaric. So, but let's talk about what a barbarian is super briefly, or what my concept is. So barbarians are more in tune with the animalistic aspect of their nature, right? Their physical prowess, their senses, their ability to survive, their position as a predator, you know. All of these things constitute the power of a barbarian. And they also talk about the barbarian's rage, which I usually think of less as, it can be angry rage, but I think of it more as like a primal fury, like a just like intense instinctual drive for survival and for just conquering your enemies, right? So that's what we're going to be working with and kind of overlaying, like, okay, what if a barbarian, starting with, we'll go alphabetically, cross-classed into a bard? What might that look like, right? So the first thing that comes to mind for me is like the musical kind of like, you know, performance aspect of the bard is a lot softer, more artistic than like a barbarian you might see. So I'm like, okay, well, what instruments would the bard use as a barbarian? It's got to be something tough, you know. I doubt it would be a lute. Those strings will break. So I'm thinking like, you know, like a flute type thing. It's just like a stick of wood, maybe even a big one that you could hit people with. You could have a big didgeridoo sort of thing, like, and then that like paralyzes their enemies or whatever. And, you know, he can bash people over his side. It might even be like, could you do something with rocks? Like hitting rocks together, like I've seen these people who play this box. They sit on a box and they're like, and it sounds very cool. It's a great percussion instrument. So that's the first thing I'm thinking. And then the other thing is that like their songs would be like power metal, you know, or it'd be like metal. Like these songs would be like, yar, you know, like I feel like a lot of yelling in between like the verses. That would be another aspect of the barbarian bard cross class. And see, is anything else coming to mind there? I'm thinking that like they're gonna dress a little more bardish, maybe you don't necessarily have to go that route, but if they were to dress a little more bardish, it could be like, you know, some jewelry. I could see that for a barbarian bard. And so there's the whole thing about the bard colleges, which brings up an interesting idea. Like, did this barbarian go and study in a civilized institution? Like, what? Seems unlikely, but that's what is implied. So there's a lot of interesting ideas for the backstory there of like, well, what led him to go and join the civilization? Was his tribe wiped out and he was adopted into this situation? Or maybe the whole area where they hunt and stuff was like a huge forest fire, right? And it just burned down, and the only thing was this like remote bard college up in the mountains. And he was like, well, they have stores of food, there's no game, there's nothing to gather, I'm going to perish, and I am a barbarian, I must survive. So they go and take over. Or maybe he went in there, tried to come in with his like great club and just start bashing them, but they were like, and then he was like incapacitated, and he's like, ah, you have great power, I respect power, teach me your ways, you know. And then he was like, fine, I'll learn this stuff, um, but I won't like it. So that's the barbarian bard. Let's go on to the next class, the barbarian cleric. How can maybe this barbarian was a divine intervention, you know? He was about to perish of any kind of thing, starvation or a great beast that he couldn't defeat, and like some kind of one of these deities of this world interceded and said, you have a second chance. And he was like, okay, all right, I get it, I'm grateful, like I shall serve you. And you know, be like barbaric, but I'm still a barbarian, that's my roots, but I'm trying to live a life in accordance to this new set of rules, this new yes, you know, this deity's kind of MO. So that could make an interesting clash, and I like the idea too that like carved on his axe would be the symbol, or like, you know, the what's it called, the holy symbol or whatever that they carry would be somehow grafted on to his equipment or tattooed on his chest, maybe, you know. And then there's a healing aspect too. So I could also see a barbarian getting into a clerical way as a healer for his tribe, or just to enhance his combat prowess, because he's like, look, this is one of the best ways that I could become more advanced and stronger than the other barbarians and then the other warriors. If I can heal myself with magic, then like I'm unstoppable. I'm already extremely capable of taking hits and just, you know, like, you know, the high HP and that kind of thing, and toughness. So imagine that combined with being able to just magically heal yourself. You're just like this indomitable spirit. I could see an idea of like a barbarian who's the conqueror type, you know, like leading an army or like conquering other tribes or whatever, and he's just clever enough, you know, he's got that strategic mind, and he realizes that like this is going to be his greatest asset. If he's able to heal himself, then he'll be able to, you know, battle on a whole nother level, which is also going to bring us to the druid. Is that the next one? That would be great. If the druid is the next one, so that's another, he could, I think that's probably more likely for them to go the druidic route to heal themselves, and also because then they can turn into animals and stuff. So the druid and the barbarian, that's an easy cross class to understand. They're both living in the wilderness. Maybe comes across a druidic order, is either like helped by them or maybe indebted to them somehow. You know, like the druids help the barbarians to defeat an enemy tribe or defend against a powerful beast. And so now the barbarian tribe's indebted to them, so they send one of their warriors off to serve the druids, and he becomes a druid himself, and like kind of serves as like the muscle and the more melee combatant of the druid's order. So that could be an interesting idea. And it's just a natural progression of like, you know, becoming more in tune with nature. So I could also see an older barbarian, you know, who's seen several, you know, he's had his battles and stuff, and now he's kind of like zenning out a little bit. He's just like, you know, I want to find harmony with nature. I've fought against the beasts for many years, and I've come to find that we're not so different after all. And there's a kinship between us that I wish to explore. And then there's also the elements. Just being like, look, I want to be able to burn people. Because that's pretty powerful. And barbarians respect power. So you've definitely, and then also just like turning into a bear and stuff. you know, like seems reasonable. But I feel like the barbarian's already physically tough enough, so the transformation into animals wouldn't maybe appeal as much as the complement of like magic and that kind of stuff would to them. But who knows? Um, the fighter. Okay, a barbarian fighter. So this is like to me the barbarian who's decided to hone in on his combat skills, you know, more um uh with more consciousness. So like actually Conan's a barbarian, right? And those scenes where he's training in the movie with the like in the like Eastern type area where he's got his katana looking sword and he's doing the forms and stuff like that, right? That's kind of like a barbarian going cross classing into fighter, I feel like. Instead of just being like brute strength, you know, just instinct, there's like, there's a method to this. There are tools of the warrior, you know, I can expand my toolbox. This could be a barbarian who gets conscripted into an army or decides to join an army. Maybe he sees that, okay, this army's quite strong, you know, these civilized people, they've defeated us in combat. You know, they have better armor. They have their weapons are, you know, more diverse, and so they have this advantage over us. And I can't have that because I'm the barbarian. I must be the most mighty. You know what I'm saying? So, so yeah, a barbarian cross-classing into fighter makes a lot of sense, and will just basically enhance what the barbarian already has. Ooh, a barbarian going into monk. So this I could see like a barbarian ending up lost somewhere and comes across this monastery and is taken in perhaps. Or he actually ends up in a fight with a much smaller, like more, you know, slender or less physically intimidating humanoid, and he loses, and he's like, what is this? How is his strength, you know, like how's he able to just block my punches and like dodge all my blows in a more calm manner, you know? The barbarian's freaking out like, this guy's just like, ching, 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 ching. I don't know why his hands make sword sounds, but so then he's like, it is, you know, like my spirit and my internal energy, the key, you know, the chi. He's just and then the barbarian might be interested in harnessing that power for himself, of course, and also the supernatural skills of like speed, or you know, being able to jump or move in certain ways that the monk has, and then the fact that they fight unarmored as well. Like all this is very much like a barbarian might see that there is a great, you know, benefit to learning that stuff. And there's also an interesting thing because it's like yin and yang. Like the barbarian's fury and instinct is one side of the battle equation of just this pure physical intense brutality, while on the other side there's the like intuitive, which is also instinctual, but it's more of like a more spiritual instinct rather than more of like a physical raw battle instinct. It's more like a little bit more like refined and delicate in a way almost. So it's kind of like a balancing. I could see a barbarian being like, I will balance the two sides of my nature, and then I'll be unstoppable in combat, sort of thing. So that could be an interesting idea. Let's see what comes next. We have the paladin, the barbarian paladin. I think that would be a very natural choice. Now there's a cause, they want to be righteous, right? So there has to be some turning point to cause the barbarian to choose a path of righteousness, to embark on a quest that's for something greater than himself, right? So there's always the tribe, but I think that's like the biggest question. It's like, what would typically drive a barbarian to set his life, to live his life for something greater than himself? And what is that greater thing? And you know what? I'm not actually 100% sure. I'm wondering too, because the paladins have some healing powers, right? So there's also that idea that like they would be attracted to. But yeah, perhaps there's some darkness. Dark powers settle over the land. Skeleton and demons, are like in what's it called? They're all up in the woods, the barbarian woods, all up in the barbarians' mountains. He's like, this is no good. These creatures are unnatural. I cannot have this. And then he like somehow becomes a paladin and is just like, smite, holy smite, because he needs the power of the light to dispel the darkness and take the plague out of his land. You know what I mean? It's not just like he can like, it's not just about just like survival anymore. There's more to it. What else have we got here? Next, we are moving on to the ranger. Of course, the barbarian ranger is another obvious choice. It's a barbarian who has chosen has a more skillfully based like route for survival, and it could be one that's also left the tribe, and so he has to live on his own, and so the survival instincts are more important, and he becomes more attuned with nature. Do rangers get an animal companion these days? Because I feel like the idea of an animal companion would appeal to a barbarian. It's like an extension, like having the first off, the primal nature, both of them would get along, and they kind of understand each other on a deeper level. But also, it's like an extension of the barbarian's own senses and abilities. Like he's kind of like able to track, to survive, to have an extra set of eyes, and that would appeal to the barbaric nature. Moving along, we have the barbarian rogue. This is an interesting one. I like that idea because the barbarian tends not to be stealthy or diplomatic, right? They're just barging into the room, bashing skulls, moving on to the next one. But the rogue has like, they kind of sneaking around, getting into position, and then they bash the skulls and move on to the next one. So a barbarian might choose a rogue's path. Especially, I could see a barbarian coming into the city if he was forced into an urban environment and doesn't fit in already, and just like, I'm gonna stay in the shadows because I don't really want to deal with people, and also I don't want to be like imprisoned or get a lot of attention. So kind of learning the path of the rogue would keep them, more hidden in the mists and stuff like that. And then also like learning to speak and like talk his way out of a situation, to pickpocket and stuff like that. Like these are the things that I think it's like survival. I could almost see the rogue being the barbarian of the urban landscape because it's all really about survival, and the rules are the rules of nature. There aren't like arbitrary rules that you follow. It's more about like what's effective, what's actually going to get the job done. And so that's the rogue and the barbarian kind of share that in common in a way, I feel. Moving forward, we're getting into the spellcasters, the pure arcane spellcasters, which is interesting. A barbarian sorcerer, I think, is an awesome idea because that's the most natural expression. It's like the primal expression of magic, and the barbarians are like the primal expression of combat. So if a barbarian were somehow infused with like some dragon or fae blood magic, whatever, or he discovers like maybe it gets triggered at a certain age, those genes start to express themselves, and he's like, oh, I can press a digitate. What's this? It's a little creature in my hand. Whoa, what's that? I can make the lights go out. And then he's like, interesting, and it comes from a more natural expression of who they are, rather than like a learned scholar, which is going to be the next ones, I think. So or like a wizard, which we'll get into. So the sorcerer could be like, I'm trying to imagine like, how could a barbarian, if he isn't already have those just genetically predisposed to sorcery, what might be some game mechanics that would allow, or like you know, like a kind of background for the character that might give him sorceress powers. And I almost feel like if a dragon came in and subjugated these these folks, these this barbarian tribe, perhaps there's some kind of ritual where he like drinks dragon blood or milk. I don't know what dragons have. Stuff you don't want to. So somehow he like infuses his powers with the dragon, or just even like meditates with like a dragon scale that's like still infused with its magic, or he ends up. Oh, maybe he finds a portal like to the Fey realm. Somehow he's walking and he just walks into like a mushroom circle that's actually a secret portal into the Feywild. He's in there for like 3 months just trying to get out. Then when he finally gets out, he spent so much time in there, his like cells and DNA have been infused with the vibration, the resonance of Feywild, and so he has like some natural magic that's still able to express. So those are some ideas. How a barbarian sorcerer might arise. After that, we have the warlock. So it'd be really interesting to see how a barbarian finds his patron. You know what I mean? Like, again, he could be ended up in the Feywild and he has to like create an alliance to get back. And that's what triggers the warlock spells. He's like, okay, we'll serve each other. And, he didn't even want to be a warlock, but that ends up becoming, part of his identity because he gains these powers through this alliance. Or if it's a more dark, barbarian, he might come and make an alliance with like some super buff demon guy, and just be like, I want power at any cost. And he's like, you shall have it, but you must serve me. And he's like, yes, my master, like something like that. Not that I'm condoning that, but it could happen. It could happen. And so you've got the dark side, the fairies. What other patrons do they have? Like an alien, like what is this? What about just, barbarians have always seen these lights. The tribe has always seen these lights in the mountains, the UFOs, like, and you're like, what are these mysterious lights? And one of them is intrepid enough to go out and be like, I'm going up on that mountain and I'm not leaving until I see those lights. And they recognize that he's something special, he's got a certain curiosity and drive that the other humanoids don't have, and they take an interest in him. And so this alien creature becomes the barbarian's patron because of that, and he returns with mystical powers and becomes the village chief. But the tribe becomes strange and corrupted by the unusual ways of this otherworldly being, and they wreak havoc on the balance of the tribe's alliances. Perhaps it could happen. It's possible, Finally, I think the wizard is the last one. We come to the wise old wizard, or young wizards, perhaps. Who knows? And there are different schools of magic. Each one would have its own story for the barbarian. Necromancy, for the barbarian who's lost a loved one, or his whole tribe has fallen, so he wants to gain the powers to raise them back as a skeletal army to take vengeance upon his enemies. It's possible. The School of Illusion. Interesting. I wonder how that would work for a barbarian. That would be a fun one. Evocation is obvious because the allure for power. But the real question is, how does the barbarian gain these powers in the first place? Because the barbarian has like an aversion to literacy. I don't know. In 3.5 edition, they began illiterate. I don't know if that's still a thing, but the idea of like excessive amounts of study, reading, and like fine-tuning these things doesn't seem to be very barbaric. And maybe this barbarian didn't want to be a barbarian. He was always a different kind who was a little more scholarly, a little more studious, more intellectual than the rest of barbarians. And then one day, they raid a village and a young wizard perishes in the fray, and he kind of picks up the book and he's like, what's this about? Just kind of curious. And he starts checking it out, and one day he like reads the thing just right, and like he conjures like some creature. giant squid. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. He's like, all right, I'm into this. I like this. Oh, no, I don't think you can eat the things you conjure. Because if you could, oh, but you can conjure food and drink. So if someone figured that out and they're like, what, that guy can just make food come out of nowhere? All right, we got to get one of our barbarians onto this because that's some proper technology. That's something useful. It's not all this like, ooh, shiny sparkles, no. That's food. Like, we want that. So, or in divination is another one that, like, as a, barbarian elder, trying to, in the, like, in the, at the mercy of nature, knowing the future, knowing the patterns, knowing, having information about things beyond the mountain range or the location of game in the forest, like things that divination might help with, would also be something that a barbarian could be attracted to. So I think that covers all the different cross classes for the barbarians. I wonder if you guys have any other ideas or if you've created characters that are cross class barbarians and how you explain their backstory and how crossing into this new class has changed and altered them for the better or for worse. So that's it. Until next time, peace, God bless, and stay fantastic, everyone.